Good morning, everyone. As you know, I am at a meeting, so I'm going to walk you through another video on how to do this lesson. You should have your binders open to lesson 9. Now, we are now in a new topic, meaning that this is going to be a probably new skill, but it might not be for some of you, but new skill, new you. I'm going to do a little bit of review before we dive into the actual lesson, which is the sums and differences of decimals. So adding and subtracting decimals. So I'm going to go through a brief explanation of place value because some of you are still a little unsure, and it's very important that we understand the different parts. Here's my decimal in the middle. As I go to the left, I have my ones, my tens, my hundreds, thousands, so on and so forth. If I go to my right, it's similar but not the same. I have my tenths, my hundredths, and my thousandths, and I can keep going that way. Now, when I'm taking a fraction and putting it in decimal form, I need my denominator of my fractions to be in tenths, hundredths, or thousandths. So meaning that this needs to be a 10, 100, or 1,000 so that it makes it really, really easy for me to solve. So for example, if I look at example 1, because the 10 and the 100 fall into this nicely, I don't need to do any converting. All I need to do is write this as a decimal. So I have my whole, so that'd be 2 10s and 5 1s. And since this is 3 tenths, I'm just gonna put my decimal and put a 3. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I'm adding, I'm just transferring that symbol. 376, 376, that's my whole, a decimal, and 77 hundredths, 77 hundredths. Now, when we add or subtract decimals, we have to line the decimal up. So for example, when I'm taking 25 and 3 tenths plus, I'm not going to start writing my 3 right under the 2. I need to make sure that my decimals line up. So it's actually going to start over to the left. 77. Now, some of you might be a little bothered by this blank space. Now, you can use our invisible math that there's an infinite amount of zeros so that it doesn't bother you as much to have that blank space. Now, we are going to do our normal adding. 0 plus 7 is 7. 3 plus 7 is 0. I'm going to carry that 10, or really the 1. Bring down the decimal, because when we add or subtract decimals, it all lines up. 5 plus 6 plus 1, that's 12. Carry that 10. 7, 2, 3, we have 10. 3 plus 1 is 4, okay? So your new decimal should be 402.07. Now, if I wanted to put this back into decimal, or I'm sorry, if I wanted to put this back into fraction form, here's my whole to the left of the decimal. And I'm looking at what place this number is in. This is in the hundredths place, so this is gonna be 7 over 100, 402 7 hundredths. All right, now we're gonna work with subtraction. Same thing, but now this time it doesn't have these nice denominators. We need to make them so that they are in the tenths, the hundredths, or the thousandths. So I'm gonna look at these numbers and kind of figure out what would be the easiest, and really the easiest for both of these would be to put them into the tenths. So when I am going to do this, I actually do not need to touch my whole number. I'm only going to touch my smaller fraction and make it into an equivalent fraction. So I'm going to take 426 and 1/5. I'm still going to transfer over 426, but I need my bottom now to be a tenth. How did I get from 5 to 10? I multiplied by 2. Whatever I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So my new fraction is 426 and 2 tenths. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. So my original whole is 275 and 1/2. My whole is just gonna transfer over. And again, I'm gonna make sure that this is a 10th. I'm gonna make sure that this is a 10th. 2 to get to 10 is times 5. Whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. Now I'm gonna transfer these, and just like I did up here, I'm gonna make these into decimals. So I'm gonna go back up to 426 and 2/10. 2/10, so I still have 426, 426 decimal, and 2/10. So I'm just putting a 2. Same thing down here, I'm gonna go over, carry over my 275 decimal, 275 decimal, and 5/10. So I'm just bringing my 5 in the 10ths place. Now I have to do the math of subtraction. So I'm gonna take 426.2 minus 275.5, and I'm gonna do that math. This one's actually really nice because there isn't a blank space, there isn't a need for an invisible 0 in our invisible math, so I can just do my normal subtraction where I need to borrow and I need to carry it down, bring down my decimal. Some of you who are really struggling with lining your numbers up may find that decimal work is more challenging for you because you're not lining it up. That's going to be one of the bigger issues as we're going through this, that if you don't line it up, it may not necessarily get you the right answer. So I did that subtraction while I was talking. 150.7. I'm going to also show you what that looks like in fraction form. So I have 150 is my whole. This is in the 10ths place. So I have 157 tenths. 157 tenths. So as I turn the page, I start to get into these word problems. And these word problems are exactly the same. Now for this, really you need to read it to be able to understand whether you're going to subtract or you're going to add. So just really pay attention to what they're expecting of you, and then making sure that you're changing denominators if you need to. So for example, Samantha and her friends are going on a road trip that is 245 7/50 miles long. They already have driven 128 53/100ths. How much farther do they need to drive? So since I'm trying to find out how much farther, I'm really talking about the difference, so I'm going to subtract. So my problem is 245 7/50 minus 128 53 over 100. Now, I need to change one of my bottoms. I really do. I need to change this so that it is in my hundredths. It's going to be a lot easier to do that since I'm just going to go up to the next one. So the only one that I'm going to change, and I'm actually going to change it up here so I don't ruin my workspace. I still carry this. Now 7/50, I carry 245. I need to get this over 100. If I do this, it's times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top, or whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. So here's my new fraction. So this really is 245 14/100ths minus 128 53/100ths. Now we're gonna put this in decimal form. Decimal form 245.14 minus 128.53. Again, when we set these up, we need to make sure that we are lining up my decimals. So regardless of where numbers are, the biggest part is this lining of the decimals so that I have everything lined up that I need. And now I'm just gonna solve. Now the subtraction part's easy. It's just subtracting large numbers, and as long as you bring down the decimal, you're gonna get this right. It's not like multiplying or dividing decimals where it can get a little complicated and we have some special rules. So really, we're just working with the normal numbers that we're used to doing, and there's nothing fancy. So after I do my subtraction, they have 116 61/100ths left to drive. Now you can put it back in decimal form, or I'm sorry, you can put it back in fraction form if you want, 1/16 and 61/100ths, but it's not necessary. So I want you to do numbers 2, 3, and 4, either by yourself, with a partner, or the people at your table know you may not move around the room. I'm gonna give you a little hint because instead of having you try to figure out if it's adding or subtracting, I really want you to focus on the skill of changing it if you need to, or aligning things so that you are able to do it. So number 2, that's gonna be an addition problem. Number 3, that is also gonna be an addition problem. And then when you flip the page, number 4 is going to be a subtraction problem. You notice I have 5 X'd out because you're not doing it. I will give you a tip for number 3. You do not need to change, but you may need to put an invisible 0 in because they're not the same. For number 2, you don't need to change the denominator. For number 3, you are going to need to change it of 1. And for number 4, you are gonna need to change it for this one because this one has 100th at the denominator. So go ahead, you are going to work on that. Your guest teacher, Mrs. Williams, are gonna give you about 15 minutes to work with a partner and discuss and practice this skill. After about 15 minutes, or if you guys finish before then you are able to use your notes for the exit ticket, but you are not allowed to use each other. You know that, and you know that Mrs. Williams or your guest teacher will take away your exit ticket if you are not being honest, because we want to see your work. We don't want to see the person next to you. So after about 15 minutes, Mrs. Williams and your guest teacher will pass out your exit tickets. You know to turn them into my bin. When you are done, you may go on Dreambox, or if you have been assigned Khan, you may do that. The only people that are allowed to have headphones in are my friends who are working on Khan and Khan only, no music. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.